All right. Good evening and thank you for coming. My name is Lisa Knauf. I'm an attorney in Addison. My topic tonight is planning for incapacity, planning ahead for your eventual or your family members' incapacity. I'm going to start out with a couple definitions so that we're all on the same level. What is capacity? I had somebody ask me that a couple weeks ago. What is incapacity? And we're going to talk about medical, financial, and legal considerations when you are planning ahead for incapacity. First, a little bit about me. As I said, I'm an attorney in Addison. I've just opened a new office down the street in Lake Street near the Croggy Mobile. Before that, I was with a practice in Itasca. I've lived in Addison most of my life. I'm a Driscoll graduate, so those of you that went to AT, sorry. But I am the parent of two Driscoll graduates, two Addison Trail graduates. And I went to Marquette University for my undergrad, and I did my, my grad school, law school at NIU out in DeKalb. I'm on the library board here in Addison, so thank you to the library for having us as always. We've just actually finished a renovation of the interior of the building, so if you haven't walked around down in the children's department, it looks really fabulous with some new furniture. I'm a VA certified attorney. I'm also a member of the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys. So some of what we're talking about tonight, elder law is really kind of a new area of the law as our population is aging, and so many of us are getting additional education and certification in topics that affect our seniors and our aging population. And then I do some volunteer work for various legal aid organizations. So you're thinking, what does this lady know about incapacity, right? She's 55, she's got 2 kids, but I have some personal experience. I'm a cancer survivor. I was diagnosed 14 years ago with stage 3 breast cancer when my kids were little. They were 4 and 6. And I had a second bout not too long ago. So I also had 2 high-risk pregnancies, so I spent scads of time in the hospital on bed rest with potentially a life-threatening situation. So in both of those situations, I had to stop and think, what am I going to do if I can't take care of my family? And what am I going to do if I can't make my own medical decisions? And when you're in the hospital for 12 weeks, you rely on other people to go to the bank for you, to make medical decisions. What if you need emergency surgery, which I did. So I have a little bit of personal experience. I also spent a bit of time when my grandmother was sliding into dementia and what we were going to do with her as we moved her. So I do have some personal experience in this area. And it's something to think about. Think about it when you're healthy, which is why the library asked me to come in and present about this tonight. So what is capacity? What is incapacity? It takes many forms. It's often related to illness. So it could be mental health, could be mental illness, dementia. A lot of people are hearing about Alzheimer's, which is a form of dementia. It's actually the fastest growing form of dementia in the United States. And then physical health, which I myself faced, your inability to manage your own day-to-day activities. When living alone becomes unsafe, so you may not be able to leave the home, go up and down the stairs, feed yourself, and taking care of your home. At some point, all of us, and if you were here earlier, I was joking about my dad, who's 82. He was 82 in February. And he thinks he's never going to become incapacitated. He and his 84-year-old brother are planning their hunting trip to Saskatchewan for next month. But at some point, he may not be able to go up and down the stairs or may not be able to shoot out the window of his Suburban at flying birds. So medical capacity, what is medical capacity? It's a decisional capacity. Do you have the ability to make your own medical decisions? You have to understand both the nature of the decision you're making and the consequences. So I understand that surgery to remove my arm is removing my arm, and the consequences are I'm not going to have an arm. And you have to be able to articulate that to a medical professional. This is most important when you're talking about life support. Do you understand that removing a feeding tube or removing a ventilator means that you may not survive? And so if you want that, you need to be able to articulate it and communicate that, as I said, to your doctor. Legal capacity is my area of the world. When people come to me and they say, I want to sign a power of attorney, I want to sign a will, I need to be sure that you have what's called legal capacity. You have to be able to understand the nature of your decision and the consequences. If I sign a financial power of attorney naming my daughter to make decisions for me, I have to understand that she's got access to all my finances. She could sell my house, close my bank account. So when somebody comes to me they may understand the decisional capacity for medical, but may not have the capacity to execute a legal document. So it might sound like I'm splitting hairs, but when I'm working with clients who are facing illness, these are important. They're important things to understand. I keep hitting the wrong button here. So if you're facing a serious illness, it can affect legal capacity. I ask, what is the nature of the illness? What's the current diagnosis? What does the doctor say? Is this something you're going to recover from, or is your ability, both physical and mental, going to continue to decline? We sometimes ask physicians for reports. I ask families to get them from their doctors. Is this person going to recover? Do they have the ability to make a decision? And depending on what we're doing, they may or may not be able to execute documents, or they may only be able to execute some documents. But almost always, even if people that are in the throes of dementia, and I've worked with clients that have dementia, they know who their kids are often. They know that someone's making medical decisions for them. They may be better in the morning than they are in the evening. So sometimes I can assist a family if I know and understand a little bit more about the person's mental capacity and the nature of their illness. And then there's something called testamentary capacity, and that's kind of in the legal world. When you're signing a will or a directive, can you sign a testamentary document? Can you sign a document that gives away the stuff you own or puts somebody in charge of making your decisions? And I have to assess at the time of signing if you have mental capacity. So I may have somebody who has illness in the hospital, and they're totally out of it because they just came out of surgery. They might not be able to sign, but a week later they might be able to. So as long as you're clear-headed and understand the nature of what you're signing at the time you sign it, the fact that you have Alzheimer's or have dementia or have illness that gets worse later in the day, the next day, that doesn't matter as long as you have it at the time. In Illinois, you have to have 2 witnesses. John here in front works for me. He's done this quite a few times. I have 2 witnesses that are unrelated to the people that are signing, because in a court of law, I need somebody to testify, if challenged, that that person knew what they were signing and that they did it of their own free will. And again, and knowing the natural objects of your bounty, that's kind of a archaic legal phrase, but if people can tell me who their kids are, and they understand that if they die, everything they own is going to their 2 kids 50-50, they understand that. They might not know who the president is, and they might not understand the seasons, but if they understand who gets their stuff when they die, that to us is one of the criteria that as attorneys we need to understand. So you're diagnosed with an illness. No one ever calls me up and says, hey, Lisa, I am so excited I'm going to a nursing home and I'm giving away all my stuff and I'm really happy about that. People call me and say, how do we not go to a nursing home? How do we afford it? How do I take care of my wife that's home, that's healthy? So when you or a family member is diagnosed, the first thing you have to do is get organized. Make a plan. I always say the more information you have is power. You're here in the library. We've got online resources and printed resources. The first time I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I think my mom and my sister got every single book in all the libraries in the western suburbs and brought them to my house so that we could all read about what breast cancer was, what the treatments were. Not everything, I know you guys aren't going to believe me, but not everything online is true. Okay? There is some false information out there. There's great medical websites. There's great legal websites. If you're going to get information online, don't do it on Twitter. Do it on, WebMD or the Mayo Clinic website. There's legal resources that are good, but get as much information as you can. It's never too early to plan ahead. If you're diagnosed with a serious illness, it puts you into kind of a shock. You can't think straight, and so you need to marshal your resources. You put together a medical team. Who's going to be your doctor? Where are you going to get treatment? Are we going to Mayo? Are we going downtown? Are we going to right here in DuPage County? We're blessed here in the Chicago area. We've got 3 research hospitals, but they may not have. I have a friend who went to Boston. She had colon cancer, and she went to Boston, had part of her liver removed and part of her colon. He was the only doctor at the time that was doing that kind of surgery. So who's our medical plan? Who's on our team? The other thing you need are advocates and people to support you. You've got to reach out to your family and friends. I know, I have a couple friends now. They're giving me dirty looks because the last time I got diagnosed, I didn't tell anybody until after I finished treatment. But the first time, I did the right thing, which was I talked to my family, I talked to my friends, I put together a plan. Have any of you dealt with the medical system lately, the last couple of years? Anybody? gone to the doctor, had blood tests. First of all your information's online, but it's very fractionalized. So if you have high blood pressure and you have a regular doctor, you have a blood doctor, you have a liver doctor, you might have a heart doctor. I have a cancer doctor. I have 3 cancer doctors, one for radiation, one for other things. They all know their part, but there's no really central place to advocate. So you need a person, a friend, a family member, somebody you hire to be your advocate to help you keep track, somebody to go with you to appointments, take notes, write down big words that you don't understand, somebody who can, if you can't make decisions and articulate your wishes, somebody who can go to the doctor for you and say, we didn't get those test results, or she had that test last week. People tell me all the time, oh, my dad's in the nursing home and they do this test 3 times because he didn't know he had it the day before. So they did it again and did it again. And then the insurance denies it. So having a team and having an advocate is a huge relief to the person who's ill, whether or not they can articulate that. And then you need authorizations for who can get the information. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And then because we are fractionalized with our medical information, somebody's got to run around and gather all your information. Got to go to the MRI place in Elk Grove, got to go to Elmhurst Hospital, got to go to Loyola, got to go to CDH. Get all your records and all your test results and get it all to the place that you've decided that's going to be your treatment home. So that's really important because otherwise you're repeating tests or you've had tests and the information's not available to your current medical team. So I'm not a doctor, but those are things that are really important. If you live part of the year out of state, then you have medical professionals perhaps in another state, then you need copies of the stuff to take with you, or you need access here in Illinois when you're out of state so somebody can get the information if you get sick when you're traveling. I'm still going the wrong way, aren't I? So the legal plan, this is for me, this is the fun part, right? What is a legal plan? The first thing I tell people is bring me your current documents. Let's take a look at what you have. Do you have current documents? Do you have a will? Do you have a power of attorney? Do you have young kids? Have you named a guardian for your young kids? Do you have a power of attorney? And I'm going to talk about powers of attorney in a minute, but these are documents that you name somebody to make decisions for you, financial and legal decisions. Are they still valid? Did you name somebody who's deceased? Did you name somebody who you don't talk to anymore because they were your friend just after college and they've moved away? What power did you give them? Did you limit the power at the time you signed it? And now you need to grant broader powers? So sometimes people have documents and they're not correct for the current situation. And then do you have a will or a trust? Do you have beneficiaries? Where are your assets? Can your family find them if you're sick? How are we going to pay the bills if nobody knows where your money is? Those kind of things. Gosh, I have flunked remote clicking. So what are essential legal documents? Everybody over the age of 18 needs 3 documents. You need a financial power of attorney, you need a healthcare power of attorney, and you need a will. I include a HIPAA release up there. The healthcare document has a HIPAA release in it, HIPAA, that's the federal law that governs medical information. So when you go to the doctor and they say, sign this form so we can send your information to the insurance company, what you're really signing is a HIPAA release. Hospitals, doctors, insurance companies cannot release your medical information. So if I call the hospital and say, if I call the insurance company and say, my daughter had an x-ray on June 23rd, they will say, we can't tell you anything. Whether she had an x-ray and on what day you took it, that's private medical information. So a HIPAA release will let the person you named to pay your bills talk to the insurance company and say, yes, oh, I see, it's double billed twice on the 23rd of June. Then there's, great, keep score. Whoever gets the most times that I go the wrong direction, I have a secret prize for you. Other legal documents that you might need, people ask me all the time, do I need a trust? It depends on what you own. If you need a trust, there's lots of different kinds, a living trust, irrevocable trust, supplemental needs trusts. I'll just touch on these in a couple minutes. Pet trust. Some people don't have kids and they have pets. Who's going to if you're unable to take care of your pets or you die, who's going to take care of them? If you have horses, if you have dogs, sometimes that's an expensive proposition. And people put as much planning into their pets as they do their kids, and that's important. It's important to them. A DNR, a do not resuscitate, there's a new form of that document called a POLST, the Physician's Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. I'll talk about that in a second too. And then a living will, which is a little bit older version of the document that you can to make your decisions for life support. So what is a power of attorney? It's a legal document created when you have capacity. You have to be able to sign the document that names somebody to act on your behalf. They're only good when you're alive, and this happens all the time. People call me, my dad died, I took the power of attorney to the bank, they won't let me have the money. That's because the power of attorney is only good while you're alive, because you're naming somebody to act for you if you can't. After you die, state law takes over, your will, your trust. There's other things that take over after you die, but the power of attorney is only good while you're alive. What happens if we don't have one? Well, yours truly, or someone in my role, will go to court, take money, I'll get paid for it, and petition for guardianship. So if I have somebody in the hospital that cannot make decisions and it's not an emergency, we need a guardian. I've got a senior citizen, I have a grandma in the hospital, she's going to a nursing home. Somebody, it has to get appointed guardian. It's expensive, it's good for people like me, bad for people like you. So having a healthcare directive or a financial directive will avoid the need for us to petition for guardianship. The bad thing about guardianship is you don't really get to pick who the person is. If you have competing relatives that want to be your guardian, the judge makes the decision. By signing these documents ahead of time, you get to make the decision. And that, to a lot of people, is important. They don't want a judge or a court to decide who's going to make these very personal decisions for them. So the healthcare one, you name somebody to make medical decisions for you. Talk to a doctor, authorize surgery, pick a facility, and now I'm going to negate what I just said about they're only good while you're alive. The healthcare person has a couple of jobs after you die. If you're an organ donor, they can authorize that. If you've donated your body to science, and the final disposition of your remains. A lot of people think about this. I have more and more clients coming in saying, I want to be cremated. I don't want a big wake. I'm Italian, so, and some of you guys are too, I know. That's a 2-day thing with food and wine, and we go out after, and all the relatives come that you haven't seen. But my mom, who's Italian, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to be laying there, everybody staring at her. She wants to be cremated, and she just wants pictures. So it's changed. The Catholic Church now allows us to be cremated. But if you're from a family that does that, then you have to write that down and say, I don't want that. I want my ashes on the East Coast, not the West Coast. I want to be near grandma, not near my awful husband that I know for the rest of eternity. So these are things you have to write down. A financial or legal power of attorney, it names somebody to make all the other decisions, everything other than healthcare. Go to the bank, file a tax return, talk to Social Security, sell your house, sign the contract at the nursing home, hire an attorney if you've been injured in a car accident so we can sue, medical planning, transferring assets out of your name if we're trying to qualify for Medicaid. This is the DNR. I called it a POLST. So this is the new form of DNR. People ask me about this. These are very limited in scope. They have to be signed by a medical person, a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a physician's assistant, and it's only when you're terminally ill, only if you have a year or less to live. So if you're home on a DNR, if you're dying of cancer and you go into cardiac arrest, what do you want to have happen? Do you want to be brought back? Do you not? If they do bring you back and you go back into cardiac arrest, do you want to be, to have that done a second time? If they put you on a feeding tube, do you want it removed? So there's a couple of categories on the new form that you can fill out. They're available on site. It's polst.org or .il.org. It's on one of the handouts. I'll be glad to give you the forms or email them, but they're applicable only in a really narrow situation, which is if you're dying, do you want to be brought back? And it's very limited in scope. Usually, and I got it in pink on the slide, it won't show up on your handouts, but usually the EMTs ask we print these on colored paper. Tape them on the fridge, tape them to the bed, because they come rushing in. Somebody calls 911, right? Their job is to save the person. And they come rushing in. If that document is not available right there, they have to save you, or they're liable. So you can't go and be going through the filing cabinet looking for this thing that you signed a year ago. It has to be available. It can come to the hospital later, but if you don't go back into cardiac arrest, it's not applicable. So if you have a family, and I actually had an EMT come into my office and explain to me how they react to these documents, and that for me was very helpful. And what is a will? A will is just a set of instructions that says who gets your stuff when you die. That's all it is. But it's only good after you die. Do you hear what I said? Who gets your stuff when you die? So people come in my office and they say, I don't need those powers of attorney because I signed a will. I say, well, that's great. If you have that stuff when you die, the will say who gets it. But if you're alive, it doesn't do any good. So that's why we need the powers of attorney. That's why we need all three legs of the stool, if you will. And that's what I just said. So it doesn't do any good if you're incapacitated. It doesn't avoid probate, but it doesn't cause probate. And what is probate? Probate is the court-supervised process of distributing somebody's assets. I'm not talking about that tonight. I'll be glad to answer questions afterwards. But, and I have a whole other presentation that I'll do at the library in the future on wills and trusts and powers of attorney and on probate. I will only mention one thing. These are cool. People ask me about these all the time. It's called a TODI, a transfer on death instrument. It's a way to put a beneficiary on a house. The reason I mention it is a lot of times people have beneficiaries on their IRAs, their 401ks, their life insurance. So if you die, that money goes right to the people that you've named. Maybe you have a family member that's joint on your checking account, so you've got access to the money. What do we do with the house? In Illinois, the only way to transfer a house is through probate or through a really expensive bond, B-O-N-D, a bond from a title company. The new way is the TODI. The reason I have it in this presentation is because it has to be signed and recorded while you're alive. And more than one time, we've been to somebody's house, I go through this analysis. What do you own? Do you have beneficiaries? Do you have co-owners? How do we save your surviving spouse money if you die? And a lot of times the house is the bugaboo. What do we do with the house? We were at somebody's house on a Friday. We actually have been there several times. She was dying of cancer. She knew she was dying. She couldn't decide to give it to all the kids or half to the ex-husband and half to the kids because the ex-husband was going to take care of the kids. She finally decides who she wants. We get it signed, and she died on Sunday before we could get it to the recorder's office on Monday. So the kids got the house, but you have to go through a legal process called probate in order to transfer it. So that was an unnecessary expense and delay in the kids getting part of that money that we could have avoided. So that's why I mentioned TODI. I have clients actually that live a couple blocks from the library, and I was at their house a couple weeks ago. I just did it. Their son was in from California. He's like, what do we do with the house? I am joint on everything else, and we did one of these. And now I record them electronically right after they're signed. But they're a great way, and I mention it because this comes up all the time, especially if we have a little bit of time, if we know somebody's going to pass away or might. The other thing to think about if you're diagnosed with an illness or you have somebody with special needs is future government benefits. How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for this illness, this long-term care? It's awful if you've ever had family members that are doing it. The cost is escalating, and so we talk about beneficiary designations, but we also talk about the healthy spouse. A lot of times I have couples where the husband's in the nursing home, the wife is at home. How do we make sure she's got enough money to live and we have enough money to pay for the husband's stay in the nursing home? I can't know if I have these in order. I'll come back to that in a second. But I'll finish the thought. The only government benefit that pays for long-term care is Medicaid. Medicaid, not Medicare. Medicare does not pay for long-term care. Medicaid does. Medicaid is a program for poor people. If you've been current administration, if you've listened to the news, how do we get all these freeloaders off Medicaid? Well, unfortunately, a lot of the freeloaders are seniors, and Medicaid is paying for their nursing home. So it's really becoming a real bugaboo with taxpayers and with our how we're going to pay for it. So I just want to touch on trusts for a second. A supplemental needs trust, sometimes called a special needs trust. We set these up for people who have kids that are disabled, family members that are disabled, but we also do them for people that are incapacitated. If the healthy spouse dies, the spouse that's ill will inherit all the money and may lose these benefits if we qualified for disability or long-term care benefits. So sometimes we use these to bypass the sick spouse, to protect some money so that there's enough left to cover for the rest of their life. And you can use that money for things that the government benefits don't pay for, like hobbies, vacations, hearing aids, eyeglasses. I went the other way. Who's keeping track? Can you get a little tick mark for that? A revocable living trust. What is a revocable living trust? It's a trust that you set up while you're alive. You can make changes to it while you're alive, and you manage it yourself. What's the benefit of it? If you become incapacitated, you can turn over control of your assets to the person that you've named, called your successor trustee. Why is that important? I've got a financial power of attorney, which is great, and they're pretty powerful, but a living trust is more powerful. I've got about 10 pages of powers that we grant to the trustee. They have far more power than what you have under a power of attorney. So I had a couple recently. The mom is ill, she's got dementia. The husband is healthy, but he's overwhelmed taking care of his wife. He says to me, I'm turning over control to my son. He's my successor trustee, what do I do? Sign a couple forms. The parents still own the money. The kids can't take the money has to be used for the parents, but it lets them turn over control while they're alive with a lot more power than what we can do and it helps us avoid a probate or court process after somebody dies. So sometimes we set these up when we find out that people are incapacitated. I'm gonna have to put a little red button on this. And an irrevocable trust is just that. It's a trust that you set up. You set it up while you're alive, but it's irrevocable. It can't be changed. I talked about Medicaid, and I'm gonna touch on Medicaid just for a minute, but I'm starting to do more of these for people who are trying to get money out of their name, assets out of their name, in order to qualify for government benefits to help pay for long-term care. And they're kind of tricky. We do certain kinds when we're talking about long-term care. The other reason people use these has nothing to do with incapacity, but if you're in a high-risk profession and you're liable to be sued, an irrevocable trust gets your money out of the way, so it can't be subject to judgment. And then a pet trust. I mentioned this before. Our pets are family members. People set these up. They set money aside for the pet. Who's going to take care of the pet? And is there money to pay for vet bills and everything else? I do a lot of pet trusts, and I've settled quite a few the last couple years. A lot of cat lovers in this area. And then there's the financial plan. So how do we pay for all this? If you're the breadwinner and you get sick, who's going to pay the bills? Who's going to take care of your kids? Sometimes you're not the breadwinner, but you're the stay-at-home parent. Now you got to hire a caregiver for you and maybe the kids. So that's a hit to the income. Do you have life insurance? Do you have disability insurance? If you're like me, you can't get disability insurance anymore, and you can't get life insurance anymore. So if you have the ability to get it now, you can get it. But if you do have it, do you have beneficiaries on it? Do we know where it is? Do we know how much it's worth? Can we tap the cash value to help pay for your illness? Sometimes that's important. And we need to talk to our accountant and our financial planner. Even if people say to me all the time, I don't have a lot of money, I don't need all this stuff. But sometimes talking to an expert, if we can save you money on your taxes, your income taxes, if we can get you qualified for disability, SSI or SSDI benefits, it can be a huge benefit to the family if you're facing an illness. There's really only 3 resources to pay for long-term care and even in-home care. Your personal piggy bank, long-term care insurance, which is a special type of insurance policy that you buy, and then government benefits, which I mentioned, Medicare, Medicaid, and then the VA, if you're a vet. The VA has an at-home care benefit, which is actually quite nice. So private pay, that's an employer or individual health insurance. We send them the bills, you pay your copay, you pay out of your pocket until the health insurance kicks in. Medicare, many of you know, kicks in at 65. It pays for medical expenses, but does not pay for long-term care or in-home care unless it's rehab. You file, you break a hip, you go to rehab for 2 months, Medicare pays for that. They'll pay for care at home, but they do not, once you stop improving and you go to long-term care, then Medicare stops. And that's where we're looking at other resources. As I mentioned, Medicaid will pay for long-term care, nursing home care, but it's a program for poor people. So you have to be poor, which means people come to me and say, I'm gonna give my house to my kids and all my bank accounts put in my kids' names, and then tomorrow I'm gonna apply for Medicaid and the state will pay for my nursing home. Is that true? And I say, well, no, it's not true, because there's a 5-year look-back period. So we're talking about planning for incapacity. If you're diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, that's a slow, often, unless it's early onset, that's kind of a slow, slippery slopes down, right? It may be 5, 10, 15 years before you need long-term care. So maybe we want to start planning a transfer of assets now and not wait 5 years. So there's a 5-year, what's called a look-back period, 60 months from date of application. So you can't give all your money away on Monday, and on Wednesday say, oh, state of Illinois, I'm poor, pay for my nursing home. Good if you're the one going to the nursing home, bad if you're taxpayers, right? So we have to plan ahead, and it's black and white. It is not, there's no gray area. It's the 61st month you can apply. If it's the 58th month, you're out of luck. And so there are a lot of things we can do when people are planning for nursing home in a shorter than 5-year period, but you need more than a week. I mean, we need as much time as possible. So I tell people, if you have somebody that's been diagnosed with an illness or you're facing an illness yourself, talk to somebody who can help you put a plan in place. I had somebody that they signed over half the house to their kids, but not the other half because they wanted to keep some control. That's not a bad thing to keep the control, but we were hit with a Medicaid penalty for the other half of the house when we went to transfer the other half of the house. So there's things that we could do. People always say, how do I save the house? And there's lots of exceptions. You have a child that lives with you, it's called the caretaker child exception. If you have an adult caregiver child that's lived with you for 2 or more years, you can transfer the home. That's an exempt transfer. You can transfer to a spouse, that's exempt. So there's things that we can do in the rules, but they're narrow and we have to be really careful. And then there's the VA benefit. It's called aid and attendance. It pays for in-home care for the veteran and spouse. It's a good benefit. The VA has enough money to pay this for a lot of vets. A lot of people don't know about it. It currently has no look-back period, so you have to qualify for income, but we could transfer today. They're changing the rules. They're putting in a 3-year look-back, but I could transfer all the money in the vet's name out of their name today, and tomorrow submit an application for aid and attendance. So,
years that you have to be in there?
Thank you. Yes, you have to have served at least 90 days. You have to be not dishonorably discharged. And you have to have served at least 1 day in a time of war. So vets that were, and there's an exception for Vietnam vets, because some of our vets were in country prior to the actual declaration of war for the Vietnam War. So I have a chart, I actually have a slide that's not, I have it, it's not in this presentation. Depending on when you served, you would qualify. And then the VA has some other benefits too. They pay for hearing aids and eyeglasses and some other things. So I mentioned Medicaid. It's a state and federal program. Illinois has rules, the feds have rules, and we're bound by them. And you can only have $2,000 in your name. That's not very much money. And I mentioned the 5-year look-back period. Here's the slide on the VA. They will pay, and not for aid and attendance, but their regular benefits. They'll pay for hearing aids, eyeglasses, prescriptions that you can order through the mail. If it's a service-connected disability, which means maybe you were hit with Agent Orange, you were injured jumping out of a helicopter, there's VA pension for vets that have been injured or later in life have illnesses that are connected to the service that they performed when they were active duty. And then the VA pension, the non-service connected, that's the aid and attendance. It's income-based, age-based, and as this gentleman said, service connected. And they are implementing a 3-year look back. They actually passed the rule, but they haven't passed out the rules yet, so we're almost 2 years into waiting for the change in the rules. But 3 years is actually better than 5, so it's better than Medicaid. But some of the rules on the VA conflict with the Medicaid rules, so a lot of times we have to look at both to see what's best. So a little bit of a review. If I can emphasize one thing, it's the planning. Don't wait too long. Don't be like the family that came to my office a few months ago. The dad had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's like 11 years ago, I think. He spoke 3 languages. He was born in Italy, moved to South America after the war, so he spoke Spanish and Italian and English when he moved to the States. He had reverted back to his native Italian, but all he could do was sing. So he sang his name to me in words. The kids wanted me to do a financial and a healthcare power of attorney. I did the healthcare one because he knew that his son went to the doctor with him, but I didn't do a financial one. And I actually had another attorney come in and speak with the family to see what he thought about this gentleman. And we both said no, and the daughter was really, really upset. I mean, really upset with me. And I said, ma'am, I can't lose my law license to have your dad sign this. He has no idea what he's signing. I didn't find out till later that I was the 3rd or 4th attorney they had gone to try and get somebody to sign this document. So you could probably find somebody and you could take it to somewhere and get it notarized. If a bank will honor it or not honor it, that's kind of up to you. But waiting 10 or 11 years, there's a lot we can do after we find out. It's better to have them and not need them than never do them. Gather your advisors, your medical, your financial, your legal advisors. Powers of attorney, I can't emphasize this enough. Some of you may know, I do these for free for college kids. So kids between the ages of 18 and 22, I don't charge for them. I do the financial one and the healthcare one. John and I have done quite a few of them over the last couple weeks. the kids are leaving these last couple weeks, and I did one last night downstairs in the cafe. I had this kid that's leaving for New York at the end of the week, came in and signed. So, and my nephew just left for college. My sister said to me, really, I pay the bills. You don't think they're gonna talk to me at the hospital? I said, you don't have to believe me, but I'm telling you, they're not. If anyone's faced it, they won't talk to you. And in fact, my own son, I have a 19-year-old, he was taken to the ER earlier this year, and I stopped at home and got my power of attorney and my book. Of course, I have my book, my power of attorney. So the guy talking to the ER doc, he comes back after a few minutes and he says to me, well, I really can't talk to you because he's 19. He's a little bit out of it because we gave him some medications, so I will, but, and before he got the rest of the sentence out, I pulled out this piece of paper and I said, I have a power of attorney. He looks at me and he goes, you have a power of attorney and you have it with you? And I said, yeah, that's what I do for a living. But it's true, and it's not just your kid, it's your parent, it's your spouse. Spouses tell me this all the time. I go with my husband, the doctor will talk to me. Sure, if you're here in Addison, but what if you're in Denver? What if you're in Florida when your husband gets sick, or you're traveling through Tennessee? They don't know that your spouse, and if you can't articulate that they can talk to this person, they're not gonna talk to him. And then consider updating your estate plan, your will, your trust, your beneficiaries. Who really owns your house? Who really has the life insurance? Where are the savings bonds? Where are the documents? Are they locked in a safe deposit box and nobody knows where the key is, or nobody knows what bank the safe deposit box is in? Are they in a safe at home? I had one client find their documents, I think it was their grandfather's documents. Do you guys know what a pocket door is? It's one of those doors that goes into the wall. I have them in my house. They couldn't find the will, they couldn't find any of the documents. One of the grandkids was playing with this door and it was stuck, and somebody went to help him and they found the documents taped to the inside of this pocket door. I mean, if you're good, floorboards in a closet, we found them in crazy places, so at least tell somebody where they are. Just write it down, put it in your shoe, somewhere where somebody can find them. Because if we don't have the documents, it's like not having them at all. I scan all my clients, I have them scanned, I store them electronically. The money ones are no good unless they're originals. It's just like not having them. I can tell you who's named, but it won't do any good at the bank. And then consider consulting an attorney, preferably an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney, somebody who specializes in this area. If you've been diagnosed, if a family member has been diagnosed with a serious illness, someone named in your documents has died. I put backups in all mine. I like to make people pick 3. I see documents all the time that only have one. Husband names wife, wife names husband, they don't have anybody else. Maybe you don't have anybody else. There's agencies, I have RNs that will serve as healthcare backups for people that have small families without other people. If you've been divorced, you're naming a former spouse, a spouse that has moved out, somebody who might not make good decisions for you, you want to change those documents. If you've recently purchased property, sold property, you own property in another state, look at that. If somebody dies and they own property in multiple states, we potentially, if you don't have a trust, we're looking at probate in more than one state. Again, that's good for people like me, bad for the kids who are going to inherit your money. And if you or someone you love will need nursing home care in the next 5 years. If you can keep that 5-year, and there's lots of stuff on the internet, you can go look, it's not all true. There's a lot of crazy rumors out there about long-term care, and if you can keep that 5-year threshold in mind, it will do you good. One thing I can say, one myth I can dispel, is the state is not gonna come take your house. They're not gonna come take the little guys in the black coats are not gonna pull up and take the keys and kick you out of your house. I had a lady in my office on Saturday in tears. Her husband's very ill, and she's already qualified. He is already qualified for Medicaid, and she's so sure that they're going to come take her house. I mean, she's like ready to pack. But she's heard these rumors from talking to her friends. They will put a lien on your house if you owe the state money with your income tax or for other benefits. They will put a lien on it, but they're not going to come take it from you. So actually, if you're the spouse and you're living in the house, it's exempt. They're not going to take it because then the state would be paying for 2 people to live somewhere instead of just one. But they are pretty strict the rules are strict. So capacity is an issue. Gather your documents, and I will answer questions. Am I on time? 10-2, what do you want me to talk about? I could fill another 20 minutes.